and welcome along to Off the Court, your regular guide to all things Vitality Netball Superleague. And a record-breaking Spring Showdown weekend demands not one, but two international coaches. Joining me, Caroline Barker, and her, Tamsin Greenway, is England coach Jess Thirlby. Jess, who watches more netball than anyone I've ever met in my life, and I know Tamsin Greenway. How do you pop up at all these games? How did you find it? How was the weekend for you?
Yeah, the weekend was great. I've got to admit, though, I wasn't physically there this time. So, I had a couple of days with the family because I think it will be our last chance before the Commonwealth Games. So, however, I didn't miss games, Caroline. So, I just watched them by any means. And Livy, my daughter's like a budding coach and player at the moment. So she has me on it all the time if I switch off for any moment. So, it was what a great weekend. I think on paper, I don't think we would have predicted maybe quite as many tight matchups as that. So it's actually really pleasing that we had a few surprises. I think a few weeks ago, if you looked at those fixtures, you'd most probably think you could have predicted every single one and more fool us, really. It was great weekend.
Well, funny you should mention, Lydia, your new partner in crime, because it's about one of your old partners in crime that I want to talk about first. Because before this weekend, we had the news that Mel Mansfield at Wasps and Anna Stenbridge at Team Bath were both going to leave at the end of the season. Let's speak about Mel first off, Tamsin, because I've heard you talk quite a lot about Anna. How big a legacy does she leave at your old team?
Yeah, well, it's huge, isn't it? It's a huge loss because if you think about when Wasps first started back in 2017, I was head coach, Mel was my assistant there. So Wasps have not known anything else. Mel has been there from the very beginning. She's taken them through. We obviously have those two titles, first year head coaching, she took them to the grand final again. So it's going to be a massive transition there. I think you just have to understand how much the coaching roles take out of you individually. A lot of travel when you have families. Mel also has another job as well. Full credit to everything she's done there. I think it's really brave talking about it now. And one of the big questions that gets asked is why do coaches do this sort of halfway through the season? And really, it's about the next transition. Mel has been such an integral part of that team. If she's stepping away, players need to know that. That makes decisions for those that are on one-year contracts. That makes decisions for players trying to play for places next year as well. So massive shoes to fill for someone coming into that role, but a huge club as well. Like what an opportunity for a new coach to come in. But Mel will be sadly missed.
Well, the problem Wasps will have is there's another huge opportunity at Team Bath. Everything that Tamsin just said, Jess, about Mel, you could say about Anna as well, couldn't you? That the legacy, the time spent there, and really what it takes to be a coach in Super League.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think most probably what people don't appreciate is what Tamsin touched on is we wear multiple hats as Super League coaches. It wasn't that long ago where there were no full-time coaches at all in Super League. And that's a bit scary, but we've moved on a lot. But what people don't appreciate is you're often the performance director, the head coach, the assistant coach, because many of your staff are not full-time. And so you still take on quite a heavy workload, not just in terms of the on-the-court coaching, but also the running of the club. And I appreciate things are moving on, and that's great. And I think some of the structures within the clubs are certainly tracking better. But I think for Mel and Anna, they've come into those environments and most probably had to wear multiple hats, not simply just what we see, around the razzmatazz of a weekend's match. And I think that can take its toll, but both of them are more than qualified for that job. But I think it's just a cumulative effect year on year for the length of time that they've both serviced their clubs for. And I think similar to Mel, Anna has other jobs. She always has had. Her time at Bath has spanned a long time, both as a player, as a coach, assistant coach with me in the early days, and then kind of moved away from Bath and then returned after her England job. And have a lot of respect for Anna to kind of step back into that role. And it was great working as a pair for as long as we did. And then the last couple of years, obviously, Anna's kind of taken that mantle on fully and managed to guide them back into a grand final. So it will be huge shoes to fill, but that's something that's not alien to Bath. Believe me, when Lynn Gunson left, that wasn't easy, and certainly it will be tough for anybody coming in to follow Anna's shoes as well. But I think it's a club that really pride themselves on being successful, having made the top four every year apart from one in their history. So again, like Tamsin said, what a great opportunity for either an up and coming English coach to step in and step up, or hopefully both clubs are big enough to attract maybe coaches with far greater experience who want to come in and take the team to the next level.
That is for next season, but already it means we've got something to talk about ahead of the coming season. Let's focus back on this then. Coming up, Tamsin's going big on her team coach and player of the weekend, but a double header of a weekend then. Only Team Bath and Sirens with those solo games. The results as it stands, Saturday on round 13, a few old tight affairs. Lightning edging Storm. Dragons picking up only their second win of the season, that 4-goal swing on Leeds. Thunder, the first of two huge wins. Pulse took out Wasps. Mavericks beat Stars. Sunday started with a shock. Rhinos beating Bath by 10. Dragons took Lightning all the way but went down by 4. Manchester Thunder breaking all records, hitting 80 goals. They're probably still going against Storm, qualifying for the playoffs too. And Pulse taking the spoils over Mavericks. And it was a case of anything Dragons can do, Stars can do too. They got their second win of the season. Rounding off Spring Showdown with a 56-47 win over Wasps. If you thought that was exhausting, try being there. What a few hours it was on Saturday and then followed up by Sunday. The Sky team did admirably, and it leaves your table looking like this. Thunder top it 14 from 14, whopping 959 goals, and they'll be in the playoffs. Lightning, Pulse, Mavericks making up the top 4. Bath, 3 points further back. Storm, Rhinos still in with a shout. Dragons and Stars just one win away from Wasps and a couple of wins away from that top 8, which both have said is their hope for this season. You can see highlights from all of the Spring Showdown on the Super League YouTube channel. Tamsin, Greenway, so many to pick from. Despite that sort of blowout at the end, I loved the Team Bath Leeds Rhinos game on Sunday. That kicked Sunday off. Stars, Wasps, Dragons, Rhinos, proper entertaining too. But which is your game of the weekend?
Well, it was a huge weekend for top 4, wasn't it? Pulse finally giving themselves some breathing space. I'd pick this one of the game of the round just because of the impact I thought it was going to have on the playoffs come the end of the season, and it definitely didn't disappoint. It was goal for goal at halftime. I think Mavs were just one up. Mavericks throwing everything at the young Pulse side. They ended up winning 2 from 2. They'd beaten Wasps the day before on what I think is probably the lowest scoring game we've had so far. They came out fighting in game 2, 53-46. Alicia Scholes getting the start. I was so excited to see her, and she ended up with player of the match. We're going to pick it up in quarter 3, where Pulse took it 12-7 and really set them on the way for the victory. So we're taking a look at Mavericks here playing the ball through, and you're going to see Kadeen Corbin and the pressure that Lindsay Keeble got into her head with the jump shot there, which is just such an incredible skill. But you have to understand how much hassle she put on Britt Clark as well, taking the ball here, not wanting to shoot. And this is when the sloppy, inconsistent errors came in from Mavericks. Sasha Corbin dropping the ball there, getting a replay, just giving Pulse extra opportunity. Now this attacking play here, I can't believe Pulse managed to keep this consistency up for the whole second half. This passage of play was 30 passes. I'm definitely not showing you them all, but what you're going to see is just the recycling of ball, and more importantly, the work rate of Taylor Honey and player of the match Alicia Scholes out the front. They just never stop. Sasha McDonald then able to get into spaces. She had the most feeds, 22 feeds in total, and Liv Tashin, 47 shots against Raz Quashi. I mean, that is incredible. Look at the ball going back again. It just never stopped. They finally break down this Mavericks defence. And here's Sheen going to goal. And that was the story of the game.
Tamsin, the thing that you mentioned, young talent, I love how Pulse, clearly things were a little bit rattled to start with when Fumi was out, but they've changed and adapted again.
Yeah, well, it was really important that they found a defensive style. Like, you can't replace a like for like on a Fumi Fidoju. I think she's set the league alight this season, hasn't she? She was top of the leaderboards. I think she lasted there a couple of weeks in the deflections, intercept, turnovers, and she wasn't even playing. That just shows what a huge impact she had. But what I was most impressed with this young Pulse side is that they have started to just stick to their kind of style. So there was nothing particular spectacular about their defensive pressure, but they worked together as a unit. I'm most impressed with how this young side is developing with experience. There were 2 big games for this team and they came out on top. Jess, question to you. How much do you work alongside your under-21 coach at England, and how much are you paying attention to those young players coming through the ranks? Because Pulse have a huge range of them and they are impressing at the moment.
Yeah, I think obviously the last 2 years have been quite challenging, even at a Roses level. So in particular for our age groups, it's been really tough. They've maybe not had as much contact time and obviously the ability to tour as we'd have hoped. So I think when Vicky Burgess was in post as the under-21 coach, we were working really closely. Shona does a fantastic job as head of our academy, and actually a lot of those under 21s, we've had a real presence in our futures program since I came into post for the last 3 years. So I always feel like we're kind of making sure that they don't fall through the net at all, because we know it's such a critical age and stage of their development. So making sure they rub shoulders with the Roses program, as well as me getting eyes on them in terms of their competition environment, have been really important. But yeah, I'd like to think moving forward, you know, we've got our Roses program announcement coming up in early May, and that will include the futures group. So don't be too surprised if you see a really healthy amount of some of the young talent that you guys are speaking so highly of week on week in that futures program. We've certainly made more space to take on more and increase the capacity and time that we work with them. So yeah, really excited and couldn't be more pleased with some of the performances from the youngsters in particular.
And you talk about the Roses programme, and of course, with 11 teams in the Super League, we get to see plenty of younger players, giving them development opportunities. I want to know your take on sending players overseas as well. Probably the last young player to go most recently was George Fisher. She's getting an opportunity in New Zealand. And we know for the previous group, like our lot, getting out to Australia and New Zealand was huge for our development. Do you think we're still at a stage where that needs to happen, or are we happy with where we're progressing over here? Do we think our league is going to make that next step up for these players?
Yeah, look, I think firstly, I want to pay credit to the clubs that are investing in their youngsters. Like, I think it's taken us a little while to get there. That pace of change has most probably been a tad too slow. And we were maybe a little bit more attracted, you know, to the sparkly, famous people, maybe from overseas. And I think, as with everything, it's about balance. So I'm a big believer, you know, having brought over the likes of Carla Moster and Denise Potgieter at Bath, you know, you come under some criticism when you look further afield. But actually, if you know your team and you know your club, you know what's needed. And actually, it might just be to fill the gap. And not only that, but to accelerate the development of the youngsters that you're working with. And that's the unseen stuff that people don't always know. So I think it's great that our VNSL clubs are now investing and giving the youngsters some court time and putting them out and giving them that platform to shine. I just think if you look at the youngsters that most probably have stood out, if you put Pulse to one side, because I think they're relatively unique in the fact that across the board, they're quite young. But if you look at Thunder, you know, they're surrounded and supported by really experienced players. So the backbone of that team is just, it's so ready for those guys to step in and shine. And that's not to take away from how the youngsters are performing in teams where there are a Nat Metcalf and a Laura Malcolm and Ellie Cardwell surrounding them. You know, like, what a luxury that is. But I think what you're seeing is it always means they're pretty ready. You know, Thunder have had to call upon some of their youngsters this year, and they just slot in. And they don't just slot in, they then earn player of the matches like Yaz Roebuck on the weekend. So it's pretty impressive to see that. I think the question around whether or not there's a need for our younger players to go overseas, I always think that's got to be managed really well. I'm always one for thinking outside the box. And I think if you ignore kind of SSN, there's a whole level of netball that you could be playing overseas, which I think has its place for accelerating the development of our youngsters, because you'll know, Tamsin, how hard it is as a mid-quarter in particular to get a spot overseas and playing in the SSN. So I think actually, if we think a bit more laterally, what experiences do we need those youngsters to have, from my perspective, in order to be Roses ready and be able to compete to win on an international stage? And that might be a 6-week exposure to a tournament in Australia or New Zealand or Jamaica or South Africa. It might just be short-term periods on their journey, which means that they've toured, they've lived away from home, they've played under the pressures of the media where netball's more popular, as well as then everything you get on court, and maybe experience a little bit more of that professional environment and daily training environment. But I would never want that to be instead of our own league developing. So I think it's kind of like that nudge, and just understanding the player is most probably at the core of making some tough decisions like that.
It's not just abroad you have to look for talent. I mean, the Chelmsford and Broomfield local league, where I stretch most weekends, Jess, is ready for you. It's ready for you.
I've had my eye on you for a long time, Caroline.
I know, most people have, Jess. Most people have. Coming up, I know you're probably all shouting at the YouTube channel right now saying, ask her about Fumi and if she makes the England squad. We're going to talk England later in the show. There's plenty more to come. Jess Thirlby with us on Off the Court.
I'm moving on.
And this is Off the Court, in the company this week of Scotland coach Tamsin Greenway and England coach Jess Thirlby. Use the hashtag Off the Court to get in touch. We've already looked at Tamsin's game of the week, but coaching-wise, Tamsin, you want to look at Loughborough and Vic Burgess. Why?
Wow, I think eyebrows were raised at the weekend when we saw the team sheet. No Mary Chollock and no Nat Panagari. Do you know how huge that is? That is a whole change in not only attacking lineup, but the style of which they were going to play. So Vic Burgess had her work cut out and she nailed it, winning 2 out of 2, beating Storm and Dragons, putting Ella Clark back into goal shooter, who stood up player of the match in the second game. She nailed 40 shots in her first game, but it was also her partnership with the young goal attack Emma Thacker, who I think really stood up under the pressure and under the challenge and totally performed. You're going to take a look at some of the clips now. So we're going to pick up Loughborough here on their centre pass. Now, they were down in this last quarter. They ended up winning it 18-12, but it was the patience and persistence of this attacking line. They didn't panic. Hannah Joseph getting the cuts and drives when needed. But how cool and calm was Ella Clark under pressure? Netting 40 out of 46. She just did not stop. She was able to shoot from anywhere. Picking up again, it was the playmaking as well from Emma Thacker. You hear she entered the game in the second half. Look at this step over the top from Clark. And you might think that was unconfident to shoot, but actually in this final clip here, she was more than happy to go to the post. Ended up shooting 7 from 10, and trust me, if you haven't seen the game, they were from distance. But again, look at the patience, the work rate from Williams and Cobden on that back line. See Thacker coming out there. They had to move Leah Middleton to get against her. She gets that front cut and drive in, and look at this, turns to post. Cool and calm as you like in that final quarter.
They were huge performances again from this Loughborough Lightning side. I know we've talked a lot about them, so we won't go on about them. Just go back and watch previous episodes. It's well worth a look, though, and watching Vic Burgess and her thoughts too. What about Team of the Week? There were second wins of the season for Celtic Dragons and 7 Stars. Are they your pick, Tamsin?
I'm going for the whole of Manchester Thunder. I know that's a bit of a cop-out, but they were so good. 2 wins from 2. They hit the 80 mark. They managed to rest Nat Metcalf on the first day. Young Yasmin Roebuck got player of the match. They pulled their full, arguably their best starting 7 against Surrey Storm on day 2, and they didn't disappoint. What I'm most impressed about is this variety in the attack end, and now how they're starting to hunt in the defensive end. Shadeen van der Merwe and Kerry Armand, they got 10 turnovers between them. We had Metcalf feeding for fun, 37 feeds, and of course, how dominant was Ellie Cardwell.
I love the claw of Ellie Cardwell, and we'll mention that a bit later. I think that popped up quite a bit in social media over the weekend. Jess, we had a tweet to Sky Netball asking how Thunder would cope in Australia. I'd rather do how the rest of the Australian teams would cope here. What we're thinking at the moment, how's our league matching up against their league? I mean, if we make it them and us.
Yeah, you always ask me this question when I come on this show, and I always feel like, am I going to be good cop or bad cop? I could make myself either really popular or really unpopular. But I think, look, I actually believe that we are incrementally getting better and stronger. If you ask me about whether Thunder could survive in an SSN league, that for me, they're very much, they're quite like Swifts. You know, really great ball retention, very clinical. Everyone plays their part, understands their role really well, and they're just relentless. Like, I went to the Thunder Loughborough game a few weeks ago, and the amount of court coverage Nat Metcalf does is crazy. It's no wonder she needed a bit of a rest this weekend on the Saturday. But you know, testament to the whole group. They're just a very well connected group, recruited really well, so they've understood the type of person and player they need in Shadeen and in Nat, and it's really added value. And I think they're getting loads out of their youngsters. But I guess this, for me, the biggest point of difference still when I'm watching, and I'm going to be unpopular now, because even when I'm watching the games on the weekend that end up being quite close, is there's way too much turnover ball. And when I say turnover, because I know this is treated differently overseas, throwing ball away. You know, I just think there's too many changes of possession. And when I just think about how that translates in terms of internationally in our Roses way and what we expect of ourselves and what we know objectively is what the international and global game is telling us, those turnover rates are just far too high. And I think the nature of them is a little bit of a worry. So if you took the Team Bath game as an example, Layla Gusketh, I think Tamsin commented on this on the weekend, got some incredible turnover, didn't make it past the next pass, you know, and I know Anna would have been frustrated with that because their 3-quarter attack and defence has been one of their greatest strengths in some better games this year. So I think really for me, if you were going to pick out one thing that stands out as still being most probably a bit off the mark, it is the possession losses. And I guess more worryingly for me is that's when you kind of you're almost practicing doing something poorly a lot of times. And it's like, how can you filter out the turnovers that were really well fought, tactically brilliant, come off the back of great structure, or maybe just individual brilliance like a Fumi Fidoju? How can you filter those out, acknowledge them, but then stamp out the ones that really are just poor decision making? Does that come down to physical fitness, mental fitness, and some of the basic skills and execution? And it's a bit of all of that, if we're honest. And I don't know, Tamsin, what you think, but that is the standout difference for me as to where we might still get caught out and found out if we were to just up and go over to Australia at this point.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot of fans watching the SSN at the moment, and sort of like the whole spectacle of it. You will watch long periods of passages of play where they just don't lose the ball, where it just goes one end to the goal and the next end to the goal, and it just continues like that. And the error rate, I talk about it in error rate, it's so minimal, and that gets better as the season goes on. My question then, Jess, is do you track it individually with players? Is that one of the systems you look at? I remember when I was in the England squad, we were very much given feedback on, as a wing attack, how many unforced errors I've made, but also the possession time on the ball as well. Is that something that you're looking at across the board, across all players, or just people in your Roses programme? Because that must help with selection if it's kind of a Roses style that you're trying to crack on with.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one. We often debate it. We've got loads of stats, as everybody will always have. I know Tamsin's a big fan of stats as well, but you've got to be able to, for me, I'm not good with numbers. I'm definitely more a words person. I don't know if you've guessed that. I like to talk a bit, but I like the story of what the stats are telling me. So the qualitative part to what it's telling me. And I think you have to be very careful. I think if you're going to focus individually on errors, then you've also got to make sure you balance that with possessions or feeds and the percentage against it, because somebody could handle the ball a lot there, and then they may be the person who's made the most errors. So you've got to kind of look on balance as to the overall contribution if you're going to look at it individually. So yes, we can get that and have that, but I think it's more trying to look across the collective of the teams you're working with and or the league they are part of, and saying what is the current landscape here and what's causing it to either be near to or further away from what the global game tells us we need to be able to produce. So I think, I always kind of enter that individual bit with caution, but I think it can be used really well as some strong evidence to help with, a defender who turns the ball over loads, the crowd go wild, everyone applauds it, you guys congratulate them in media, but actually the bit that gets missed is the 3 footworks they did, the offside on your own centre pass, and that stuff needs picking up. So you kind of, I've worked with individuals before from like a challenge mindset around what's their net contribution at the end of the game. So is that in the plus? Whilst you don't want those things to happen, as long as we're in the plus with it, we can work with that. But it's not okay to be accepting of those errors, because ultimately, when they move into international, we're going to get caught out and lose a game because of that. So net contribution, I think, is a nicer way to frame it, so they're always striving to just get more ball back for the team than what they've given away, and then just drill deeper down into it.
I mean, put everything else aside, this is definitely why I'm not playing international netball under you. I love an error, and I'm proud of them every day. Let's talk quality players then that both of you could have. I know you must be happy, Tamsin, that Hannah Layton's back. She's on return to play with Dragons, but she had a huge impact in just a few minutes. We saw her. I know neither of you can have them, but Katu Avaiti and Liana Leota, epic, standing out again for stars. Alicia Scholes, who you can have in that pulse win, was also equally a standout player. But who's your player of the week, Tamsin?
Well, there was so many on the list. You've mentioned a couple there. I had Ella Clark up there as well. Rebecca Airy and her impact. Massive game against Team Bath 6 in step, but she was pipped to the post by Green Noel. I mean, the character of the Super League so far was in tears, I think, of emotion at the end of their game, their big victory against Rhinos, and ran Loughborough Lightning so closely as well. She had 11 turnovers in the first game of the weekend, I think 18 in total across both games. It's just her complete work rate alongside that personality. So her physical attributes, what she can do on the court, but alongside that, the passion and the drive that she brings right to the end. So this is the final quarter, and Green Noel had such an impact. You're going to watch her here with the massive instep. This was going goal for goal. She gets that turnover there. Brie Grierson thinking it was wide open, but it was not just that. It's her whole play on the shooter. Watch her here. Doesn't get to it, but challenges on it. Look how quickly she recovers and in for the attacking rebound. My favourite part of this, you're going to see Rhinos get pulled up and she is just going to give a little fist pump, a little, yes, we got this. And it's that kind of personality that is lethal. And this final one, as Rhinos are playing this ball through, and these are in the dying seconds now, and they're clinging on here. Look at how quickly she comes out to stop Brie Grierson, forces Berger into an error, and gets Dragon on the way to their win.
I love that she wasn't pro before. She's just 25. It was a 1-year deal, I think, at the time was reported. They would love to hang on to her. You face, Jess, England face Trinidad and Tobago in Group B. That's your opening game, Friday the 29th of July. I mean, you can like what you see now and then think, oh, how are we going to deal with it then? But they've got a few players like that, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think what's great about our league is we've got such diversity in terms of other international players that it's really helpful for either Tamsin or myself, because we get like a snapshot as to what form they're in, how they're connecting, what their style of play is, and you can anticipate, you know, what that's going to look and feel like when they embed back into their own teams. So to be able to watch somebody like Green Noel is excellent. But I've got Pippa, our analyst, who has done and will continue to do a ton of work in terms of opposition analysis. And not only, first and foremost, we're following the form of our own players and those that are really pushing to get into the Commonwealth Games squad. But alongside that, there's a big piece of work around the form of the critical players in all the other top nations. And it is really helpful. And I think that's one of the great things about our league, is it gives us a bit of an insight as to how they're tracking.
I remember watching it in reverse, the 792 games we watched in Glasgow at the Commonwealth Games, didn't we? You spotted Bongyum Somi there and managed to get her to come and play for you. So it can be a treat for the league too as to who stands out. So some incredible players that we saw this weekend then playing. Jess, here comes the Fu Me sound the alarm question. I know it's a few weeks before you name the team. Can there be last minute pushes? Are you completely settled in your mind as to who you're taking?
No, definitely not. I mean, we'll have the Roses programme announcement in early May. So I've had a nice warm up to kind of thinking about who do I want inside the programme for not just this Commonwealth Games campaign, but also heading into the World Cup next year. So that's been great, because it's really got me thinking and reflecting as to the performances and really pulling apart and dissecting and interrogating the data that we've got, as well as the subjective insights from the coaches. You know, I've got Sonia, who's over in Australia, getting around to games and connecting with the players there. She's just been over to New Zealand to watch George Fisher, who had another standout performance. And then I'm getting around to games here. And our coaching WhatsApp group's interesting when you've got Liana and Liv on it as well, who are obviously playing a different role at the moment across the league. So that, you know, we're certainly not settled on a 12, and I don't think we need to be. I think most probably for most probably the last 12 months, we've had 18 to 20 players who realistically are most probably pushing, and it will come down to form. And for that reason, we're leaving our selection for Commonwealth Games as late as we can, and we're giving everybody the full Super League season. And by doing that, we're also giving those that are overseas as much of their season as possible to show us that they're in form, and then allow us to decide whether or not we believe that they are the right people to reconnect with the players back here in the UK as well. So, yeah, our selection for Commonwealth Games will be shortly after the Super League Grand Final, publicly maybe a little bit longer after that. But it's really exciting times, and certainly not set on a 12 at this point. And week on week, I go to games, I review games, and somebody just puts their finger up where the previous game, they were maybe a bit quiet. And just when I might be thinking one thing, it's kind of like, no, not ready to make a decision on them just yet. So Fumi, if you're asking me about Fumi, I agree with everything everyone says. I think she is a huge talent, hence why she was in and around the programme with Futures last year. The only one thing I would appeal to people is what you see on a court for 60 minutes is one thing, but there's a whole narrative under there around helping to manage these young players. And Fumi is an incredible talent with huge physical attributes, and we just need to make sure that not only with Fumi, but with all of the young talent, that we support them accordingly, so that if and when they break through, they're here for good, you know, and that they don't kind of get elevated too soon, too quick, without the necessary support around them. But what an incredible impact she's had, and actually almost takes the attention off some other people in that team that I think will almost get going about their work, like Azara Everett. You know, don't underestimate what she does, which enables Fumi to come out with the ball. And I think it's really important that you kind of cut through the bit that's nice and sparkly, which is your job to point out. But it's also then, I'm very curious then to understand, well, what's enabling Fumi to shine in that way? And sometimes there are others around her that are really worth paying attention to as well.
Such a shame that you two are so sensible and reason, and I can't really argue with you. But if you want to put us in the WhatsApp group, we'll gladly join it. Right, here's some other games then for you to look out for this weekend. Bath Stars, Lightning Sirens, Wasps, Thunder Sunday, Wasps Rhinos, and then Dragons Pulse is the one I'm looking forward to on Monday night. We promised you some social before we go. Eleanor Cardwell getting on the hands debate. Eve Corbett, I think, asked if Ellie has super big hands. If you've not seen, go and have a look on the Netball Super League Twitter, and you can see a run of Ellie's, not big hands, but perfect claw. She actually responded saying, I've actually got quite small hands, but I use my forearm. And she uses it well. And we also saw Temalisi Hukatown make her debut, which is brilliant. But credit to the social media team as well at Netball SL. They've nicknamed Emma Thacker Hukatown, which was one I would love to do. Who wouldn't want to see that? Right, we already know that Manchester Thunder are heading into the grand finals weekend. You can be too. Tickets are on sale now. Just head to the England Netball website. Jess will be there. Of course she will. Maybe you can make your late claim for the England team as well. Just approach Jess. I mean, don't approach Jess. I mean, she's very approachable. Maybe we should just end it now. Jess Thirlby, thank you so much for coming on. Good luck with the headache that is naming the England squad. But I guess the thing I will take from this is form, which is brilliant. Coaches don't always do that. And just how lucky we are to have some fantastic talent in this country. Tamsin, Scotland will do well too. Fingers crossed. Right, we will see you all after round 15. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.